Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. We're here for another episode of Infernal Intercourse with me and my companion, Pastor Brian.
Hello.
So today we want to talk a little bit about the character of the mother in season 2 and kind of expand from that on some ideas about mother goddesses and what they are responsible for, or if they really existed, and we're going to cover a bunch of stuff. So but I'll let Brian go ahead and talk a little bit about season 2 of Lucifer with the character of Mom, the creation goddess.
Yeah, and thank you. And I think it's important. I think we both have said this. We come to this just to watch the shows. We do not know the origins in the comic books, so we're not exactly sure where Mom came from and whether she was considered a creation goddess by the comics or whatever. But there are some areas. Martha's better than I am at remembering exactly how it happens, but there are some areas where I think it's pretty clear they are kind of presenting her as a co-creator, at least with the Father or whatever. And so I just think that's interesting, because do they feel like they had to have a goddess equivalent? Do they feel like it's such a popular notion among people that there was goddess worship, or that there everything was great when we had these goddess societies, which I think Martha in the past episodes, and I'm sure in this episode, has mentioned this seems to be bull. But why is it they included her? Because it's not part of any kind of traditional canon that follows from I hate to use the phrase Judeo-Christian, but a Western idea of this cosmology. So I just think it's kind of an interesting thing that they introduced her, and I thought she was a great character. And then it is kind of a weird thing to make her almost co-powerful with the Father, but then a lot of stuff like her being in hell, and how that she has to go through the different worlds and be brought, there's a lot about her that makes her much less powerful, really, it feels like at times, than her children, the angels or whatever. So it's all kind of confusing in general, but I do think it's talking about something I think is important in our society, which is, I think we see that matriarchal solutions in very real everyday ways in our communities often work obviously far better than patriarchy, which is failed in every way. And so I do think that is fueling this idea of this idealized past with a matriarchal goddess culture. So I think that's kind of where it makes sense to me to look at why was she how she was in Lucifer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I liked her all right, but even the humans who know what's going on, they don't suddenly kind of go, wait a second, creation goddess, what happened? I read the Bible. I used to go to church. Everybody seems to conveniently be more or less Catholic. And so they already have an inborn belief or whatever. Inborn's the wrong word, but they've been trained to believe in angels and demons and heaven and hell in a sort of Catholic sense. And, but there's no room really for a mother goddess there. So when Linda finds out that, Lucifer is really an angel and he really is Lucifer, and then he's got a mom, it's like, huh? Where does Mom come in? I'm flipping through a Bible where I don't see her anywhere in here. I see your dad, I see mentions of hell, I see a couple of mentions of you. Where's your mom? Right? So she doesn't seem to come from any particular tradition that everybody else seems to come from. Yeah. And then so we're not clear on what she actually did versus what God did, and what they did together versus did they do things separately, and then she gets sent to hell for some reason I don't think we've ever found out. And if we're wrong, somebody who watched the episodes more than we have, and put it in the comments. Why did she get sent to hell? I don't know. And then she stays there and she gets tortured, and Maze is like, well, I never could break that woman, and Mom is like, well, that's because I never did anything wrong. And it's like, why were you even there in the first place? Yeah. And then how does she break out? And then, how does it just doesn't, I didn't really understand how she fit into the mythology of the rest of the show, I guess.
And she makes sense for a story, to tell the story. And I like that she is internally consistent because, Hell didn't harm her because she didn't have guilt, right? Which we've all, is the weird thing about how this works in this universe of Lucifer. But I think there's a difference between, very, Orthodox Catholicism and even some other versions of Christianity that like take in these traditional ideas of Lucifer and hell and angels and things like that. But there is a lot of well-developed, very popular New Age spirituality that merges in and out of the traditional Christianities. And so I do think it fits very well into kind of New Age spirituality with a Christian flavor of having this idea of a goddess and, being a mother to all creatures, including, humans and angels or whatever. It doesn't fit in with any established canonical cosmology, but it just is kind of like this, well, it feels right, kind of a spirituality, maybe. I don't know. But
Yeah, and mom again, even though she invents everything, she still has to learn a lot about humans, right? All these cosmic characters, when they come down, they don't seem to understand humans at all, and they become a bit more human as they learn about us. Because at the beginning she's like, well, I'll just kill Chloe and that'll fix Lucifer's problem, right? And then Amenadiel's like, hey, don't you dare harm Chloe because he'll do exactly the opposite of what you think. You think he'll come back running to you, but he's really going to hate you forever. So she has to, kind of get up to speed on humanity, which seems like even if the angels had been ignoring humans all this time, if she helped invent us with God, then you'd think she'd understand us better. But I don't know, maybe it didn't work for the story. She needed to be much more remote character who then again has to learn like everybody else. But she seems to really find like Lucifer's like one of her favorites. Apparently, she seems to treat him like she really liked him best. We like paraphrase his mother's brothers, and really in a sense, Lucifer is a pretty feminine character in some ways. Right, he is we learn from his sister, right, that he protected her when she was bullied by the others, and so he's almost like this like mama bear kind of character. He goes and protects the young and the helpless, right? And even when we had the episode where they have to track down his 93 or 96 lovers or whatever he's had over the past 8 weeks, to see if one of them could be the killer, and he says to Chloe, I'm the devil, I'm not a Rolodex. And yet in the very next scene, they're interviewing people. So he clearly has everyone's information. He seems to know them as individuals, right? They're not just a one-night stand. He doesn't know your name, right? When you get up in the morning, it's like, oh, whoever you are, here's some money or here's a breakfast and goodbye. He seems to really care about them in some sense, even if he's, still at that point, maybe not quite as empathetic a character as he becomes later, but he's clearly treating people, as individuals, and not brushing them off as sort of a master slave or, I'm your boss or I'm above you kind of thing. And then obviously by the end, he is learning how to fix hell and to rehab the entire human race and make everyone be eligible to go to heaven by learning from Linda. He's been sitting on her couch for 6 seasons, and now he seems to have absorbed enough on how to make people more self-aware about their own feelings and how to atone for their feelings that, he's touchy-feely guy, and now he can help all these poor souls who've been in hell for years or, thousands of years. And they were going to get to go to heaven once he is able to help them like see the softer side. So in a sense, he's got this whole like feminine side to him, and maybe it's because he was close to mom, but then we don't really see it from her so much.
Yeah,
she Linda. I mean,
in traditional shorthand, if mom and dad are acrimonious, right, the children who most reject dad or rebel against dad, of course, are more mama's babies, right? Like, so that kind of makes more sense. Amenadiel stayed closer to dad, Lucifer, would have been more favorite to mom because Lucifer apparently rebelled more toward dad. I don't know. I mean, that's a mix of what's in the series and what's in the traditional mythology. Who knows? But so I mean, that makes sense to me, I guess. And then this whole idea, like you said, of being, if you're quote a mama's boy, right? In our culture, that's a shorthand for something. So I think that I never really thought about it that way, but it does make sense. This whole, sides thing, I guess, among the celestials. But I also think too, if the angels are clearly jealous of how much the father loves humans, and so that could be part of why mom doesn't like the humans either, because I think maybe she feels like the father loved humans more than her, right? And so with the angels, mom's also jealous of humans till she gets to know them, right? Interesting.
So we could also assume that maybe the showrunners thought the series is weighing a bit heavily on male characters. Although, really, it is pretty heavy on female characters, though. All of Lucifer's friends turned out to be women, right? I mean, he and Linda start out as lovers, but then they stop that when she puts a stop to it, and they really turn into friends. And there's the episode where, she wants to come over because she knows he's having difficulties emotionally, and she's like, should I come over as your therapist or as your friend? But friend won out, so she really sees herself as his friend. And Chloe obviously gets very close to him as a friend, and Ella, and it just seems like the women that he meets and, are the ones who he is comfortable with, and they seem comfortable with him pretty much. And it's not just the fact that he has this supernatural charisma, because obviously it doesn't work on Chloe. But it doesn't only takes like a couple of episodes for her to see enough in him that she's like, I kind of like working with you. So, it's cool if you want to hang around. So he obviously can handle friendships with women. We don't see him really handle much in the way of friendship with men, because certainly he's not really friends with Dan. And they sort of tolerate each other at times. And like once in a while they have a little scene like in the improv thing, where he and Dan have this discussion about something, and he promises to keep one of Dan's secrets or something, and they seem to be kind of bonding a little bit. So you get like a couple little episodes where they seem to be kind of getting a little closer, but then they don't really. And even at the end when he saves Dan from his hell loop, which ultimately damns Dan further, his intentions are good, but he still doesn't seem to understand Dan or what's going on. So it's interesting that he is a male character that doesn't seem that cool with other males, just to be like bros or whatever. There's no sitting around with the guys, it's sitting around with the women.
Yeah, I mean, and early on, especially like when we're talking about when the mother's introduced, I mean, really none of the men are reliable characters. And Amenadiel was annoying, as can be. Eventually Amenadiel became a character I really liked, but it took a long time to get there. And Amenadiel was really annoying. And of course, Dan was completely, I feel like treated badly throughout. And so, the writers of either the comics or this show in general just seem to default to this idea of, women are the only capable, reliable, intelligent, consistent people in the world, and men are all oafs and idiots and losers and need help and need to be taken care of and selfish and clueless and insensitive and unself-aware, right? Like, I mean, that's very much, Ella's my favorite character, I think, in many ways, and because, not as essentially as some of these other folks you mentioned, but just like a really solid, intuitive, smart, get it done, person throughout most of the time. And even Maze, that's why it bothered me so much when they made Maze flaky, because from early on, Maze was, very clear about how Maze was, what Maze thought, how Maze acted, and what mattered to Maze. And so much more consistency from the female characters. Eve was the most flaky, but Eve got more consistent over time.
Yeah, and even it was towards the end of season 2, I guess. Yeah, because it was when Lucifer was plotting to do something about Mom, right? And so he didn't tell Maze the plot, right? And then she's upset that he didn't trust her, he didn't come to her, and they have a fist fight in the street. And they end up in Linda's office. They're both all, black eyes or whatever. And Linda's like, well, how does she feel about it? And he's not used to thinking about Maze as someone who has feelings, because apparently, in hell, the demons did their thing and he did his thing, and feelings weren't really something people talked about or that aware of. And he's like, well, she's never felt that way before, and she's crying, right? And then he's like, oh, and then you have a couple seasons of them really trying to struggle on how do you switch from I ran hell, I was your king, and you're my subject, and I tell you what to do. In fact, in the first season, he said a couple times, he just say things like, well, this is what you're supposed to do, so you're going to do this, because you're my bodyguard or you're my whatever. And she goes with that. But by the, season 3 and 4, we're really seeing her come out and say, no, I don't think so. And they kind of managed to work out some kind of friendship. It's harder for them. So they have all this backstory. They've got to, baggage they've got to work out. But again, then he ends up, with more female friends. And even with Eve, when he tells her, I don't like who I am when I'm with you, and he kicks her out basically, but eventually they seem to kind of come around. And so, but not with any of the guys. It's just, so we put Mom in this show to kind of show maybe where Lucifer gets some of this from. I mean, we don't really know how the genetics of this all works, right? So do they kind of like their dad and kind of like their mom, kind of like they have genetics, or do they just sort of like, because I guess they just sort of appeared the way, because when Linda first really comes to grips with that, she knows these celestial beings and they're in her life, and she says, well, how did you become like this? And they're like, oh, we were just born that way, or we just came that way. So, Amenadiel's always been able to slow time down, right? And Lucifer's always had this supernatural charisma. And that's just the way they are. It's just the way they came. And she doesn't seem real impressed with that, right? But on the subject, like Amenadiel being very annoying, he was very annoying. And Lucifer was also very annoying sometimes, really annoying.
All the time. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think sometimes they backslid with him, where especially season 3, where he seems to be doing better, and then he decides he's going to be jealous of Cain, right? You get more high school boys being jealous of each other kind of crap going on. But the fact that he is becoming more relatable, he's becoming more self-aware, and you see Amenadiel's kind of going through the same thing, because at the end of season 1, he's lost his wings, and he's now stuck on Earth. He's lost his ability to play with time. And now he finally decides to cope with by claiming it's, God's testing him for some reason. And then he'll pass this test by, and so he's still treating Linda people kind of like really poorly. But over the seasons, as he gets to know humans better, again, he's starting to become more self-aware and learning how to cope with actual relationships and coming around and being a much better character and someone you empathize with a bit more. And that, just as an aside, my favorite scenes of the whole 6 seasons is when he's shedding his feathers, and Maze or Linda, somebody knocks on the door of his office. I think that's when he's pretending to be a psychologist or something. And he's like, there's feathers everywhere. He's trying to get him up with the little vacuum cleaner. And he's like, yeah, I'll be there in a minute. He's trying to get all these feathers off the carpet. I just love that little scene.
Yeah.
All right. So is part of that then, as we move on to more historical, maybe ahistorical concepts of a goddess, there seems to be something in the past century, at least, where a lot of people really, really want to think there was a overarching mother goddess kind of figure. I mean, Jean Ahl used that, in her Clan of the Cave Bear books, exclusively. All the Cro-Magnon people worship just one goddess. And it was the Neanderthals who had like multiple male spirits that they worshipped. But even then, when they have the ceremony in Clan of the Cave Bear to make Ayla a hunter, the shaman has to call up their deep memories of the time when there were only female spirits. And it's so long ago that they've all forgotten this. It's just this deep genetic memory that they still have. And it's just very, very faint because it was so long ago. And then the male spirits took over. So you still have, at some point in the past, everything that was divine was female, right? So ultimately, all the characters in those books have this tradition of there should be like some sort of female divinity that's running the place until maybe male divinities come in and mess it all up. And people seem to really want that to be true. And that's why I have my little Venus of Willendorf charm on here, because the little Venus figurines, people have used them as a reason. They pointed to them, oh look, they made little female figurines. They must have worshipped a mother goddess, and she was like the Earth Mother. And it's like, well, that's a big leap. You're going right from, hey, I have a female figure, to, hey, there was a universal mother goddess figure, and there's no, that's like going from A to maybe Zayn or something. I mean, it's like not even maybe in the same alphabet. But people really seem to want that to be true. But we don't have any evidence that it was true. With the Venus figurines, there are some of them that are male. A lot of them are broken. So people are now coming up with ideas like maybe they were toys for the kids. And when the kids broke it, you threw it in the trash dump and made them another one or whatever. Maybe they were like teaching tools. Here's a male one, here's a female, and here's your birds and the bees lecture or whatever. And again, once they broke or whatever, got used too many times, they'd toss them in the trash and get another one for the next, talk with the kids. So there's a lot of things that could be going on that aren't right to everybody had this universal mother goddess idea, but it still seems to really, really appeal to people.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting. I was just thinking how much, because, I do feel like we're still in a completely patriarchal society and system. But I, on the one hand, I think, well, patriarchy is cis hetero, right? And cis hetero men are obsessed with women's generative parts, right? So, it kind of makes sense why they notice, but men also have been obsessed with penises through all of history as well. So, I mean,
look at any Roman town. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, so to pretend that there were only these Venuses or Astros or whatever, and Astartes, and not all of these Baals and all this other stuff, I just do think it's coming from this idealization. Maybe it's part of the Madonna whore thing that we do, where this idealization of women, and so this idea that a woman-led society would be perfect. And I think it's just contributed to by the fact that we do know in reality that our patriarchy is completely toxic and failed. And so one thing we haven't tried is real matriarchy, at least in Western culture and anything that we understand. So I don't know.
It may turn out that women are just as corruptible as men and be just as awful, but who knows? We haven't tried, as you said. Really not a true, I can't think of any culture right now that's really tried a true matriarchy. Matrilineal, there's certain matrilineal societies, and there are societies where women have more rights. Interestingly, the Egyptian women had more rights than almost everybody else. They didn't have all the rights men did, but they could own and inherit property. They could write wills. There's even a will that's been found, and it's this woman's like, yeah, I bore 8 children, 5 of them never come to see me, so all my wealth needs to be divided between the other 3 who've been taking care of me. So women could dispose of their property legally, and then Rome came, and Roman women couldn't do any of that, right? And so because people wanted to be like, ooh, Rome's powerful, and that sounds kind of cool, let's adopt that. And so then you have Egyptian women as a sort of to ape the more powerful women, enlisting male guardians to come and sign documents and stuff for them, just because it was kind of cool and foreign. But originally didn't have to do stuff like that. So certainly there are some places where women have more say. But is there really a place where women have been in control the way men have been in control? And I can't think of any. If anybody else wants to think of some, put them in the comments. We'll take a look. But
I mean, and we're dealing right now with, literally, we've just taken away women's right to bodily autonomy again in our culture. But I still am amazed to think that women couldn't have, it's all been in my lifetime that women can have credit cards and banking accounts and things like that. So we are really, really far from even parity, equality, anything among men and women in our society still, as much as we like to think that we're further along than we are. And even before the most recent debacle. But I think that must be where it's coming from. But this idealization of women, I just feel like really feels like that dangerous Madonna whore complex thing. It feels like another way to erase and dehumanize and take away agency from women by casting them in some other idealized image, right? You know?
Yeah, there was a golden age, and the goddess,
Yeah.
and the women did, all this stuff. Yeah, nothing, there's no really evidence of that. And as I was reading Alpha God, and I recommended, I think I recommended that in several episodes ago, but I'll recommend it again, where the author is looking at the behavior of chimpanzees and gorillas in terms of how the males and the females relate to each other, and finding that, it's a lot of times humans do exactly the same thing. Silverback gorillas are very concerned with who's mating with whom, right? And what are the females doing, and if you just look at that, as you call it, set a debacle, you're right back to, hey, we're all concerned with what women are doing, right?
Yeah.
With their reproduction. So we need to control that. And that's, if a silverback gorilla could do that with the court system, they would, but they manage it with however they manage it in the wild. If it's with violence or whatever, it's still the males trying to make sure that female reproduction is controlled by them. So we haven't really gotten away from that. So there seems to be no way for there to have been like proto-humans who were even closer to chimps and gorillas than we are today. And then there's some sort of like perfect system where there's a mother goddess and everybody's all peaceful and happy. And then we go back to acting like they're silverback gorillas again. That doesn't track. We've been primates since there were primates, and that's the way our closest relatives behave, and when we're still behaving like that. So if anybody's interested in that book, I will put it down in the description, but the title is Alpha God.
Yeah. So I think them adding Mother Goddess to Lucifer, I do think as we talk about it, I'm really more and more feeling like the shorthand cliche of the clueless men who can't accomplish anything are totally unself-aware, and that the women bear them, suffer their ignorance or whatever. That seems to be really dominant, especially early on in this series. So, but maybe, like I said, maybe it was an integral part of the comics. But in which case, I wonder how and why it came out in that. But I still don't know that Mom contributed that much to the series. I don't know.
Well, we do have this thing in our culture where men are running everything, but at the same time, is it to make women feel better about themselves or something, that we have to cast at least some men as being inept and incapable? Any commercial where a man uses a household tool, immediately cast him as someone who doesn't know how to use a broom or can't use the vacuum cleaner. There was actually some vacuum cleaner commercials about 10 years ago where the guy is like vacuuming his house, and he sits down and calls another guy, and he's like, you won't believe my amazing new Hoover or whatever it was, and it does this, and it picks up the cat hair and everything. And it's like, wow, it's like two guys who would like do the housework and actually like know their vacuum cleaner and know how to use it and talk about it, and it was like, that's kind of cool. They're not, it's so incapable. But normally it's, the women are very wise, and that's the whole sitcom thing, right? And the husband's always completely stupid. And so the wife is always, and it's even right back to like, the early days of the honeymooners and things, he's kind of a jerk and she runs, him, and she's the one who's, practical and intelligent, and he's just like crazy bum of a, I guess, bus driver who's, he loves her, but it's always, he's always failing at things, right?
Where we get Married with Children, where we get The Simpsons. It's just over and over and over and over. Archie
It's
Bunker.
like as soon as you get into the female sphere of the household, men instantly become incompetent. But sometimes, of course, it's weaponized incompetence in real life, where they don't want to do anything, and then it's like, oh, I don't know how to use the vacuum cleaner, or then they use it wrong, so that the woman's like, I'll just do it, right? But so that's not a very healthy relationship. But we haven't really solved that yet, I guess. That women get to be the top dog in the home, but the guy has to be incompetent.
Yeah. I work so much now with people at end of life, and it is amazing how often I see where the expectation is that the women will do all the caring for the dying person, but the men, will go to violent lengths to be the only one who makes the decisions, and their decisions are the final decisions. And it's there doesn't seem to be any shyness about the fact that, no, you're going to do all the work and I'm going to make all the decisions. And that just seems to just fall naturally. And I see this over and over and over again. And I really, the more I think about it, the more maybe that's what Lucifer was trying to show, is that in our society we still have not come as far as we think. Because at times it does start to feel, though, like for all of its attempts to be progressive, Lucifer is really falling into some tropes around gender.
Yeah. So any final thoughts on goddesses or mom?
I think that was my final thought.
That was your final thought. I would certainly go a whole lot more on the role of women in our society, but it wasn't ultimately our topic for this week. So maybe we'll get to that later. So we appreciate you watching, and I hope you stuck with us to the end. And of course, if you want to make any comments and you think our theology is completely off, or our take on mom or Lucifer was not good enough, well, you can just give your opinion. We'd like to read it and see what you have to say. Hit that like button or the unlike button, and subscribe, and we will see you next time. So thank you, Brian, for hanging out with me again.
All right. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Bye.